Hello, thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Chamberlain Osoa, Channels Television here in Lagos. I'm joined by Vincent Makori from Voice of America in Washington.
Well, thanks. I'm Vincent Makori at the Voice of America. It's great to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Our broadcast still looks a little different because of the global pandemic, but we truly appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Chamberlain Oso in Lagos brings you that story.
The Oyo State government in southwest Nigeria is exploring areas of comparative advantages to the nation's economy through agriculture. Earlier this month, the governor, Seyi Makinde, received a delegation of developing partners led by African Development Bank who are beginning a project that is designed to be transformational to the agricultural sector of the state.
Delegations from the African Development Bank, International Fund for Agricultural Development, and the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture converge on Governor Seyi Makinde's office in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital.
Also here we have the Honorable Commissioner for Trade and Commerce.
The former team, the AFDB representative Dr. Chuks Ezedima, states their mission.
The bank is currently in the country to undertake what we call a full appraisal of the Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone. The Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone is the Feed Africa strategy program of the bank. And currently the project is designed as a program, which means that we're going to be doing it in phases of 6 states. This is the first phase we are planning to design. And Oyo State happens to be one of the first of the 6 states that we're going to be starting with.
As efforts to boost the state's economy intensifies, Governor Makinde reiterates that areas of comparable advantage in the state are being explored, chief among which is agriculture.
We are keen to take our space in terms of agricultural output. And as an administration, because we want to take as many of our unemployed youth off the streets, and we think agriculture, agribusiness is the way to go for us.
Next is a stakeholders engagement where deliberations between state officials and the development partners continue.
We are looking at contiguous areas where we can do an industrial agriculture, and that's why we are developing the farm estate. Now that it's called the Agribusiness Industrial Hubs. We've started building, and we're hoping that by the end of this year, crop production and industrial processing will take place within all those. We've started building.
After this, the team moves from Aton Village to the Awa Integrated Farm Center and then to Fashola Farm Settlement and the abattoir on the outskirts of the state capital.
Small ponds all around. So we collapse the small ponds.
Oyo is one of the 6 states selected to benefit from the Special Agro-Processing Zones project, which is designed to be transformational, youth-oriented, and environmentally sustainable. Bukola Oriowo, Channels Television News.
Let's get more on this story from Deborah Akande, an agricultural consultant and also the Director General of the Oyo State Agribusiness Development Agency. Dr. Akande, thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. What do you think is the likely impact of this partnership of the ADB with states in Nigeria to agricultural growth of the economy?
Practically what the strategic agro-processing zone is all about is to change the approach in agricultural practices across board. Up until now, what we have been doing is to focus much more on agricultural practices that is driven more by fragmented approaches, which relies strongly on just the smallholder farmers. But what this partnership will bring on board is more of an industrial agricultural focused approach And what that basically means is that we'll start having centers and areas across the whole of the country that are contiguous, that are protected, that has the facilities that are required for any kind of agricultural practices from farm to fork. And then that will focus on comparative advantage within that particular area. So in a nutshell, what we'll be seeing at different sites, across the whole of the country where we now do agriculture the way it should be done in the modern age.
Narrowing it down to Oyo State, how is it going to benefit citizens, particularly the unemployed youth who the governor has recognized needs to be helped?
So for Oyo State, even before the meeting with the African Development Bank, we have a strategy that we adopt, and practically it's looking towards how we can ensure that we are food sustained as a state, even within the Federation nation as Nigeria. But beyond that, we have also we are looking at how we can turn Oyo State to agribusiness hub of the country, and we've started with what we refer to as agribusiness industrial hubs, similar to what AFDB SAPZ is all about, with a bit of variation. And we started by revamping 3 of the old farm settlements in Oyo State, located in Fashola, Erua, and Akufo. And what we plan to do and what we are doing is to ensure that we create a location where industries and productions can meet each other, and they can produce and process specific crops, that are very that are known to be area of comparative advantage to the state. What this will lead to, directly and indirectly, is increase in the processing of our product locally, and meeting up with the standard that is required anywhere in the world.
All right. Now, Nigeria, and indeed the world, is battling COVID-19 pandemic, and this has no doubt affected the country's food supply. How can states bounce back to cushion this effect?
So when the COVID-19 pandemic came to all of us, what we did in a state, and which is probably something that other states in Nigeria can learn from, was to develop a COVID-19 food system mitigation strategy, which we have published, And within that, we focus on 3 strategic areas, approach we would adopt. The first one was to look at what we call the direct government intervention in areas where we can do something that is similar to what we are talking about now. The second one is where we look at a private sector investment for public sector supported areas. And the last one is what we call a cost sharing approach, where we recognize that there are smallholder farmers that has been working in the past that may most likely going to be affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And what we did was to provide resources to ensure that the core area that could be impacted by COVID-19, based on studies that were done for smallholder farmers, we provided resources to mitigate against that. So last year, sometimes, I think if I remember, June, July, we supported close to around 9,300 farmers within the state with things that we know will help them to mitigate against the impact of COVID-19. And we chose precise crops that we see as what we can refer to as essential crops for food security within the state, and then worked with those farmers across the whole of the states in the country.
All right, and Dr. Deborah Akande, thank you for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. A team of South Africans has won a Cape Town competition to create a zero-carbon home just ahead of Earth Day on April the 22nd. Experts say the house design, which incorporates solar power, passive cooling, rainwater harvesting, and a food garden, could help reduce the nation's carbon footprint. Vinicius Assis reports from Cape Town, South Africa.
A team of 9 South African students and young professionals won the first My Clean Green Home, a local building and design competition. The contest challenged designers to build a house that produced no carbon emissions with a budget of just $12,000.
It's a good way to bring what we believe and what we study to the general public and to actually share this with the city of Cape Town and the festival to actually educate people more about net zero carbon buildings.
Despite the small size, just 7 square meters, the house's quality surprised the public.
Being green is always expensive, so it can't be rolled out to everybody. But if this is sustainably, economically viable, then it makes a lot of sense.
Cape Town authorities say buildings consume 38% of the city's energy and generate 58% of its carbon emissions. They aim to have all new city buildings carbon neutral from 2030.
People can take elements of this home and bring it into their own houses, or they can rethink what a house might be.
South African green building experts say the net zero concept should not be limited to Cape Town. Net zero refers to when emissions are balanced by absorbing an equivalent amount from the atmosphere.
My Clean Green Home project could definitely be applied nationally. It is an example of a project that is net zero. You can go and see it. It's been built during COVID. It's been built with materials that we already have available, and that shows that it is possible.
South Africa has for years suffered rolling power cuts that leave people without electricity for hours at a time. The country's power problems could ironically help drive more South Africans to net zero buildings. Vinicius Assis for VOA News, Cape Town, South Africa.
A Nigerian startup, Grissid, has created a Wi-Fi-enabled cooling box that can keep blood, medicine and vaccines at the correct temperature while being transported in the tropical heat of Lagos. The company plans to help ferry COVID-19 vaccines around Lagos. Grissid storage boxes can keep items as cool as 20 degrees Celsius using a mobile app.
Distributing vaccines across Nigeria's hot and dry terrain is not an easy feat. The country's limited facilities mean that medical samples need to be collected and transported, often through poorly maintained roads, to laboratories, sometimes miles away.
Before we refer patients to the lab, but now when they came here, they make the job easier for us in taking the sample to the lab, and it's easy our service delivery.
So last year, the government hired logistics startup Grissid to help transport temperature-sensitive items. The company now uses cold chain monitoring boxes to move blood and plasma samples and vaccine vials. The cold boxes run on solar-powered batteries that can keep the units working for up to 24 hours. And they're the brainchild of Nigerian engineer turned entrepreneur Ogenetega Iyotim.
If you look at the African terrain, you know that some of the major challenges are one, communication, but secondly, which is more importantly, the lack of access to grid, which is access to power. And so for that, when you look back, you would see that there were challenges around accessing ice packs or ice gels that are required to precondition when transporting things like vaccines or samples from the last mile to the city. With this now, which you know, this is like a solar-powered, battery-powered device that doesn't require all those. So without the infrastructure, this works.
The company launched its Wi-Fi linked cooler boxes in 2019, meaning customers can track products and their temperatures in real time using a mobile application. The company charges at least 1,000 naira for delivery services, depending on the weight and distance packages are going. They plan to extend to other African countries, supporting health sectors and beyond.
Still to come on the program, Shade Ajayi is not your average student. Meet the 50-year-old scholar, proving it's never too late to get an education.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Hundreds of thousands of seafarers are stranded across the world because of the coronavirus pandemic. Advocates for the seafarers say it is a humanitarian crisis that threatens supply chains. Henry Ridgewell reports from London.
Ritesh Mehra signed up for a 4-month contract as captain of a liquid gas tanker in July last year. More than 8 months later, he and his crew are still stuck on the ship, unable to leave because of the coronavirus pandemic.
So the thought of not being able to go back home in time and the thought of being chained to this particular place and in a way you can also say jailed is getting onto crew now. They are thinking more about it than the actual job at hand.
There are an estimated 1.6 million seafarers worldwide. In normal times, they work 4 to 6 month contracts before crews are rotated. But global travel restrictions made those rotations increasingly difficult, according to Guy Platten of the International Chamber of Shipping.
By the autumn, we had well over 400,000 who were far beyond their original contract tour lengths, and some of them have been on board for well over a year, up to 18 months.
Platten estimates that some 100,000 seafarers are still stranded.
But what we're really feared of now is that just as we were starting to make progress with the new variants, it's starting to get worse again. And of course, with the idea of some sort of vaccine passport being introduced by countries as they come out of COVID, it's just going to go back to square one again.
In the waters off Hong Kong, dozens of ships lie at anchor, their crews unable to come ashore because of the pandemic. Reverend Stephen Miller of the local Seafarers Mission runs a supply launch that delivers goods such as mobile phone SIM cards and snacks to the crew members on board. He fears for their mental health.
You can just imagine it for yourself. You've been planning to go home, you've been planning to do things for your family or maybe see a young child for the first time in many, many months, and that then is taken away from you. So that obviously leads to sadness, which can lead to depression.
Several shipping firms, trade bodies and maritime labour organisations have signed the Neptune Declaration on seafarer well-being and crew change. It calls for all nations to recognise seafarers as key workers, allow them to travel and offer them priority vaccines. Chief Officer Karen Marshall spoke to VOA on her way back home to Texas after being stuck at sea for several months.
Merchant mariners should definitely be priorities when it comes to getting a vaccine, and the fact that we're not is insane to me. I think companies should work on making their employees, getting the vaccine for their employees so that we can start getting back to a normal crew change, normal rotations, we can all go back to our families.
The signatories to the Neptune Declaration say seafarers will play a vital role in maintaining supply chains required to roll out global vaccination programs, and all countries must recognise them as key workers. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Many of us attended school when we were young, and for many of us, school has helped us become who we are today. But what would have happened if we hadn't attended school while we were young? Well, 50-year-old Shade Ajayi proves age is just a number, even when acquiring the most basic education. Take a look.
Shade Ajayi had never set foot in a classroom until middle age. Now the businesswoman is happily learning to read and write alongside students nearly 4 decades younger than her. Donning the pink dress and bonnet that make up her uniform, she joins hundreds of similarly dressed pupils at a school in Ilorin in Nigeria's western Kwara State. I am not ashamed to wear a uniform, she says. When I go out in the morning, I wear it, carry my bag and go to school. Whoever that is looking at me should look. As a child, she worked in her aunt's shop instead of attending school. Ajayi signed up to attend school in the last academic year, only for it to close due to the coronavirus pandemic. But school reopened in January, and Ajayi finally got her chance. Sitting at a wooden desk surrounded by pupils aged 11 to 13, she politely raises her hand to answer questions. Her classmate Halimat Adedogun says it is strange to see someone her age in her class.
I see it as a strange thing because seeing Auntie Shade in our class, it has never happened before. It has never happened before, and I'm proud of Mama.
Tajudin Fatima, Dauda
Sulias. Fakaya Odeniola. Ajayi Shade. Present.
Her teacher says the mature student appeared completely undeterred by the age gap.
So far so good. Shade does not have any problem with the students in the class. She has been coping well with them, playing together, talking together, discussing things together. Even the ones she does not understand, she tries to ask the students in the class.
Shade wants other women to take a cue from her to be educated. She runs her own business, making and selling purses and bags, but believes her inability to read or write is holding her back. She intends to continue her education for 4 more years, saying it will help her business.
Almost all schools in Kenya use high-emission wood-burning fuel to cook food for students. But a government campaign ahead of this year's Earth Day, April 22nd, aims to transition schools to cleaner fuels by the end of the year. Victoria Munga reports from Nairobi.
At Alliance High School in Kiambu County, Kenya, workers are cooking lunch for 2,000 boys. The task is easier now ever since the school transitioned to using liquid petroleum gas for cooking nearly 3 months ago. But most Kenyan schools cannot afford the high cost of switching to this type of fuel for cooking, even though it can offset carbon emissions.
Inability of the institution to find resources to be able to pay for the upfront cost of installing the infrastructure. That challenge it's what now we are trying to solve.
Officials at Alliance High say installing the systems for clean fuel in schools is demanding but doable.
We have used the same infrastructure like we had earlier. We have not changed. So the issue of saving on energy or whatever energy is there, the same mechanism is the same.
Kenyan authorities are addressing the general lack of awareness of cleaner fuels by establishing centers where schools can learn about different clean energy technologies.
One of the things we do at the Green Points is to showcase renewable energy technologies, clean cooking solutions. We have schools coming to those Green Points to learn about these solutions and how to upscale them.
Organizations promoting clean cooking say Kenya's limited access to technology is slowing the transition to cleaner fuels.
Some of these solutions are actually not made in Kenya. As much as we try to support locally available products, some of these technologies, which are very good technologies, or parts need to be imported and maybe assembled here and for use.
So far, 11 schools have switched to cooking with cleaner fuels. The Kenyan government hopes that eventually all schools in the country will make the switch. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
And that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent Makori in Washington. Channels Television has our last word from Lagos.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Remember, channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Chamberlain Uso. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.